All right, I think it's time to begin so that we do not delay any further. Okay, thank you, Ben. Okay, so good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this eco-business conversation on sustainability reporting and assurance, or what I'll be referring to as SRA over the next hour. This conversation is in partnership with SGS, which is the world's leading testing, inspection, and certification company. My name is Ami Firdaus, and I'm very pleased to be hosting you today for this session, which will be a fairly relaxed 1 hour sharing by subject matter experts on SRA and how that's playing out on the ground as a critical piece of the sustainability puzzle in Asia. To get this going, we will have these subject matter experts in the space to guide us on the understanding of SRA and its importance to sustainability transformations for businesses in our region and beyond. But first, before we hand it over to them, do allow me to set some context on SRA before handing it over to them. I'm going to wait for control from the slides from Ben. So give me a second. But yes, okay, great. So essentially, to take this off, sustainability reporting assurance is the process of ensuring that companies' sustainability or ESG report meets certain standards set for sustainability reporting. A company's ability to produce such reports is a reflection of their governance, or the G in environmental, social, and governance assessments. Of course, a report will be expounding on all of the above, but metaphysically, we're talking about the G as well when looking at a report. Okay, so sustainability reports are regulated by international organizations and must follow prescribed guidelines to be considered credible. And these reports must also follow the guidelines prescribed by governance or a stock exchange, typically to be considered credible or to attract more investment. So since sustainability reports summarize the qualitative and quantitative benefits of a company's ESG activities, investors can do a lot of things with it. They can screen the investments, align investments to their values, avoid companies with the risk of environmental damage or social missteps or corruption. Now, this is becoming a more vital aspect of a company's governance operations as markets are increasingly regulating and demanding sustainability from companies. We are already actually very recently seeing that shakeup happening at a regional level in the EU with spillovers beyond. Okay. However, many companies are struggling on how to measure and report on their ESG performance. Furthermore, there can also be a lack of stakeholder trust in the information provided in a sustainability report. In the process, companies also face the issues of managing costs of driving such compliance processes and effectively navigating legal risk. In short, this is really not an easy thing to do alone. So in response to all of these challenges in sustainable reporting faced by businesses, there are many benefits for a company that undergoes SRA with a third party. So let me talk about a few benefits that companies can really think about. The first and really most obvious one is the elimination and reduction of shareholder doubts and concerns. There's also the accuracy of analyst earnings forecasts that you might want to think about. There's also the lowering of operational costs and risks in managing assurance processes, and also the realizing of potential for market gains. And this can be seen in many ways that kind of build on what I've shared in the last 3 points: higher stock prices, more favorable borrowing rates, and unlocking green finance investment pathways among them. So ultimately, sustainability reporting assurance is really all about building stakeholder trust and inspiring confidence. It has great potential to mitigate greenwashing. It could make ESG-linked remuneration models feasible. It could help draw and properly allocate greater flows of green finance and build greater trust between companies and stakeholders, right? So to really wrap this up before handing it over to the experts, I want to ask some questions to all of you. How can companies unlock the full potential of reporting assurance? And how can consumers and regulatory environments leverage on reporting assurance to reach sustainability goals and satisfy their demand for a greener economy? So now, for the rest of the time to 12:35 or thereabouts, our experts who are joining us for today will tackle these questions and more in detail. They will take us on a deeper dive on what the state of play looks like for SRA in Asia and perhaps even beyond. So do allow me to introduce them briefly. So first, we have Dr. Ali Adig. Dr. Ali Adig is the head of the ASEAN Regional Hub of the Global Reporting Initiative. As the head of GRI's ASEAN Hub, Ali is tasked to promote the practice of sustainability reporting across Southeast Asia by working with relevant stakeholders to create a conducive policy environment for sustainable business practices, promote wider adoption of sustainability reporting, and build the capacity of organizations in sustainability reporting. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Ali. Next, we have Mr. Mark Blick, who is the CEO of Diginex. Diginex is a fast-growth technology company helping companies of all sizes with their ESG, climate and supply chain data collection and reporting. It utilizes the latest blockchain technology to lead change and increase transparency in this space. Thanks, Mark, for joining us. Finally, we have Ms. Fin Han, who is the Global Technical Manager in Sustainability Reporting Assurance at SGS. Ms. Han has over 18 years of environmental engineering and management experiences in audit and consulting. She specializes in ESG and sustainability reporting, sustainability management, and climate change. Ms. Han has conducted numerous iterations of sustainability report assurance. Now, I could throw a lot of ISO numbers at you, but I won't. But essentially, she's covered these iterations in areas such as sustainable procurement performance assessment, task force on climate-related financial disclosure performance assessment, event sustainability management audit, greenhouse gas verification audit, and carbon footprint of products verification audit, as well as water footprint verification throughout the course of her career. All right, so thanks everyone, all of you, for joining us today, and please do fill up our chat box with your questions as we go along with these speakers. Now, we're going to start off with Dr. Ali, and I have a question for Dr. Ali to start us off. Could you share with us what GRI is all about and how GRI standards might actually play a role in sustainability reporting assurance?
Thank you very much, Ami. Before I answer a question, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, wherever you're logging in from. As Ami mentioned, I am Ali. I'm the head of GRI's ASEAN Regional Hub. This is, we've never seen so much interest on anything sustainability and ESG than in the past, 3 or 4 years, which is good news. But at the same time, it's kind of disheartening because it means that everyone is in a panic mode. If just a bit of history, the first, it was in 1998 when the NASA scientist named James Hansen, called on the urgency of climate change when he made the presentation on before the U.S. Congress. And even all these discussions in alphabet soup about sustainability reporting and all that stuff, GRI has been created in 1997. This was before the concept of sustainability reporting existed. At that time, companies are just required to submit financial reports. And for those who are already alive and breathing at the time, we know that around the 90s and the 80s, that was the time that there were so many corporate behaviors and scandals were happening, all over the world. So our creators, Ceres and UNEP, deemed that it's high time to hold organizations and corporations accountable for their non-financial impact. And that is what, that is how GRI was created. Sorry, I was like, I do have control of the slides. Let me just, okay. So having said that, GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, for those who are not yet acquainted with us, we are an independent international organization providing the global common language for corporate transparency. And we help businesses and other organizations understand and communicate their sustainability impacts through the GRI standards. So as I mentioned, we were created in 1997. So we are the world's most widely adopted sustainability reporting framework, and use of the GRI standards is for free. You can download it from our website. So we have 4 focus areas. We create and maintain the world-class sustainability disclosure standards, which we put out there for free. And of course, we drive the global adoption of the GRI standards. And it's not enough for companies to just continue reporting, but we always advocate for the continuous improvement of the quality of reporting. And most importantly, we support full public access to sustainability disclosures. So our report must be public and subject to scrutiny. So this is just, I'll just quickly go through this. As I mentioned, we have been around since 1997, and this is our impact in numbers. So just being the pioneer in sustainability reporting, 75% of the largest 250 companies in the world is now using GRI. And here in Singapore, in particular, 90% of SGX issuers reference GRI. And in terms of policy referencing by regulators and stock exchanges, we have at least 168 policies in 67 countries and regions that reference or require the GRI standards. Here in Southeast Asia, we have 6 countries that already have some form of mandatory ESG disclosure. So if you look at the requirements, reporting requirements of Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, they make some mention or reference to the GRI standards. So this is how the GRI standards look like. So it's modular in form, comprising of the universal standards, sector standards, and topic standards. So the universal standards sets the basic principles and foundations of reporting, whereas the sector standards, we mainly revived this. This was under G4. And as we moved to the GRI standards, we brought back the sector standards. And this is mainly to help industries and companies in particular industries or sectors to easily identify their material topics. So far, we have launched 3 sector standards. That is for coal, oil and gas, agriculture, aquaculture, and fisheries sector. So why did we start with these 3? Because these are the 3 sectors that contribute the most greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also have the topic standards, which is divided into environment, economic, and social topics, so that companies can report specific information on their material topics. So that is as Ami mentioned, this session is about sustainability reporting assurance. So I covered the topic of sustainability reporting because there's nothing to assure if you don't have a sustainability report. However, GRI in the revised universal standards, which we issued last year, we have touched on the important topic of assurance. So if you look at your screen under GRI 1, we have added, this is a new addition on a reporting principle, which is verifiability. So verifiability, basically, we want organizations to gather, record, compile, and analyze information in such a way that the information can be examined to establish its quality. And if you go to GRI 2, there is a specific provision there on external assurance. Now, it's not really GRI, as I mentioned, is a nonprofit organization, so we really cannot mandate or require anyone to do anything. So it is actually up to the regulators to do that. But we highly, highly recommend organizations to subject their reports on external assurance. So under GRI 2, you will find there the specific requirements that we have as laid down should a company undergo external assurance. So this is just, that's all I have for now. So I turn it back over to you, Ami.
All right. Thank you, Ali, for that. That was a very nice primer on what GRI does and why GRI does it. I actually have, I've 1 or 2 questions. I think if we probably have time for one. And the first one is that I think one of your last slides talked about, verifiability as one of the latest reporting principles. And this really, brought up the question in me of thinking about the fact that despite several standards, GRI, there are other standards as well, and the efforts by bodies like GRI to build in verifiability into the process, we still do see a lack of standardization in sustainability reporting. Do you see a potential solution to this challenge, when it comes to thinking about how, who's in the playground, who's in the ecosystem?
So as you know, there's recent as I said, there's so much interest in anything sustainability and ESG, and one of the important topics there right now is standardization and harmonization. And for those who are not aware, in May, we have entered into a memorandum of agreement or understanding with ISSB. And as you know, ISSB is also in the process of issuing their own standards for sustainability reporting. Now, I think that partnership is a good development because GRI, how we encourage companies to report on their sustainability performance is based on their sustainability impacts, meaning what is their impact to the economy, environment, and society. Whereas ISSB, which is created by the IFRS Foundation, they're mainly focused on enterprise value. So on the one hand, they're focused on, they're concerned about what would be the impact of sustainability issues to the financial bottom line of the company. Whereas, so that's outward looking in, whereas GRI is concerned about inward looking outward. So bringing this together will help companies do a holistic analysis of perspective on their sustainability performance, because one without the other, especially if we encourage companies to just look on impact of sustainability to their financial performance. For me, this is my personal opinion, not GRI opinion. That is a bit dangerous because that is bringing us to the idea of Milton Friedman in the 80s, where he said that the main purpose of corporations is to maximize shareholder value. And if you ask companies to just consider what is relevant to their sustainable, to their financial performance, that could be quite subjective. So that's quite long-winded. Ami, I hope I answered your question.
No, that was a lot of erudition from you. I definitely thank you for that. And I thought it was very interesting how I think within your answer there was this subtle sketch of how enterprise value or shareholder value and sustainability impact might be, you know, there might be a risk of these two being conflated as well. So, you know, definitely that's something for the audience to think about as well. Okay, I think we're going to move. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for that. We're going to come back to you, of course, with the Q&A. But first, let's go to the next speaker, who is Mark Blick, CEO of Diginex. Now, Mark, I have a question for you to start us off as well. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation we can bandy together. The first one will be that in terms of sustainable transformation of business, where do you think the focus should be placed today for sustainable reporting assurance, and why? I think you're on mute, Mark.
Yep, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Great. Hello, everybody, and thank you for the question. I'll just spend 30 seconds familiarizing you all with who we are as a company. We're a software company. We build particularly B2B software solutions with a focus specifically on small to mid-cap enterprises. You'll see many of the logos here who we have as partners or clients or investors, and those are on the large cap side. But the majority of our business is focused on small and mid-cap enterprises who are coming to ESG and climate-related disclosures for the very first time. So our sweet spot is very much year one, day one. Holy heck, what is ESG? I've got this board member shouting at me and I need to do it. All the way through to, let's say, year 3 or 4, where you've been collecting ESG data for a while. It's probably being done on Excel. It's probably being organized through Outlook, and it's probably a little bit of a mess, and helping people make sense of them. And in that, we're building end-to-end solution for ESG reporting. For us, as everybody on this phone is aware, we are very clear that ESG is a new corporate mandate. It has been for large caps for quite a long time. People who have in-house teams of sustainability consultants, people who have budgets to be able to engage with external providers, people who have those nice billboards at airports with green shoots and watering cans and smiling people and so on and so forth. However, over the last 3 years, particularly over the last year, those requirements for ESG and climate-related disclosure have really rolled downhill very quickly to include also small and mid caps. And this has come from investors, from stock exchanges, from board members, from employees, from consumers, from regulatory reporting requirements. And is it all companies all the time? No, but it's a growing percentage of company, and certainly that is direction in where everyone is headed. And when most companies go into the market, what they tend to find, let's say you're an average $50 million a year revenue cement manufacturer, and you go into the market for the very first time to find a solution to help you with that. With your new disclosure requirements, you're going to find that most existing solutions out there are designed for large companies. We'll come back to that a little bit more in a second. Or at the other end of the scale, you have lots of these quick and dirty solutions providers, but they provide no assurance for automation. And small and mid-cap enterprises are looking for guidance because they don't understand this new language and terminology that's being thrown at them. Frankly, also, there's a cultural gap. Many of them don't like the fact they have to do this, but they are aware that this could be no longer delegated to the marketing department. This is something that has to be probably aligned within the financial reporting procedures. But they also need confidence to ensure that what they are reporting is comprehensive and meets their requirements. I have an example there. This is obviously a US-based, a US-focused example of how regulatory requirements are driving ESG and climate-related disclosures, but we have similar examples across multiple geographies. I think you guys will all be familiar. What are the tailwinds within your industry, within your country that are driving this?
All right, absolutely. I think from what you've shared already, I can see that the focus one might say the focus could be on SMEs moving forward, as that's where the new frontier is when it comes to transforming business and economy for sustainability. And it's also very interesting to see a software company in this space, I would say. And I'm very curious. This brings me to my next question that's been brewing in the last minute. Could you share a little bit more on what exactly tech and the push for digitalization, the use of software, what can all of that do for sustainability reporting and assurance? Just give us a picture of the impact of that.
Okay. You're right. Small and mid-cap enterprises are the new frontier. 95% of any economy is made up of small and mid-cap enterprises. We've always been of the view that if ESG is to have impact, it needs to have impact at scale, and it can't just be the 5% of large caps that are doing it. It needs to be everybody else, and it can be everybody else doing it within the context of their own reporting, or small and mid-caps within the context of a large cap supply chain and large caps collecting that information. What we have seen in the marketplace, and we know this because we've onboarded ourselves to around 43 different providers of ESG reporting in this space. It's cumbersome, it's expensive, it's drawn out. It has a high degree of human consultative intervention, which again, if you're a large company, is absolutely fine. You can afford to spend $30, $40, $60, $80, $100,000 on your ESG and climate report. You have the time to be able to take 15 or 8, 10, 15 steps just from starting to go through to the end of the process. And it's okay for you to start to dedicate months on this because you have a large in-house team who are dedicated towards working on this. With our clients in over 26 countries globally, typically, it's somebody who's been asked to do the reporting in addition to their current work. So it's normally someone in the finance team, or somebody in the legal team, or somebody in the investor relations team if they're public. So allowing technology to come in and to provide a role in allowing folks who don't have an expertise in this subject matter to then go from point A all the way through to point Z in the ESG reporting process. Examples I will give. Something like TurboTax in the US. Lots of people on this call, if any of you have had the misfortune of doing your taxes in the US, you know how unpleasant, inefficient, and just onerous it is. And then both at the individual level and at a company level. And then platforms like TurboTax come along and make it very simple for small and mid-cap enterprises, as well as individuals, to be able to complete their tax filing without the need for tax consultants. Similarly, platforms like Wix.com come along and make it possible for those people without graphic design backgrounds to be able to create websites. Ami, if you'd come to me 3 years ago and said, Mark, build a website, I would have said, I don't know how to do that. I didn't study it at college. I don't have a background in graphic design. I literally wouldn't know where to start. I'd be going onto Google and say how to build a website. But now a platform like Wix.com comes along and creates something that was previously for the experts and allows an average person like myself to be able to build a website. I have now built websites. Are they the best in the world? No, but they're good enough, and they if you click a button, it opens up into something.
All right, so you're the Wix.com of ESG reporting assurance. Very nicely put, Mark. Okay, and on your last slide, I think I spotted something very interesting. You compared traditional consultants to this software as a service, and I think there's an implicit question in that, in that we are seeing a huge spike in demand for sustainability consultants and ESG talent in general. And so could you share a little bit more about, other than the fact that the average person can come in and do this, what other ways might tech help fill in the gap for ESG transformation guidance and management for businesses?
So for us, it's I think I'll be provocative here, and I'll say I think the greatest impediment to ESG reporting at scale it can be sustainability consultants. First of all, there's an expertise gap where working with large caps, it's absolutely fine because the folks sitting on the large cap side understand, they're in-house sustainability consultants, so they understand the topics, the terminology, and they can interact with external providers. But at that 95% of the economy who they're either very new to this topic or dragging their feet a lot about having to do this. There isn't a willingness to engage, at least at this early stage. But I think the greatest impediment is, even if we believe sustainability consultants are the answer, which I personally don't, there aren't enough sustainability consultants in the world to meet the demand for ESG and climate-related disclosure, which is being driven by small and mid-cap enterprises, which are now entering this arena for the very first time. So for us, it goes back to how do we help companies that don't have a budget, that aren't believers in this topic, that don't have an in-house team, that don't have the time? How do we take them through all the way through from building your materiality assessment, going stakeholder engagement, understanding which frameworks are relevant for you, building that report and collaborating, validating it with your CEO or board, generating a report. And this is a perfect segue into Finn. Ultimately, then, if you require assurance, to go to a provider like SGS who are able to provide assurance services. For our clients, I always look at what is the output that they need. So year one, day one, it might be, look, I've got this board member or investor on my back, and I need to start reporting on ESG indicators. In which case, it's just about selecting some indicators, building some muscles around it, and maybe a report which you put on your website is sufficient. And you don't need assurance services because you're not at that level yet. But after 2 or 3 years, once you have a track record of data that you're collecting, you start to realize and understand that this is an asset. This is an asset which you can then use for getting access to preferential capital through a sustainability-linked loan or a green finance product. It's an asset that you can use to attract new investors. It is an asset you can use for your pre-IPO process. At that point, in addition to the validation tools we have in the platform, you probably also do want to engage with someone like SGS, who are able to provide that assurance, both at a micro indicator level, but also at a macro report level.
Interesting. I think, it really looks like you are making a big part of the value chain of sustainable reporting very accessible for the average person. And I think, it's very nice and exciting to see this happening, having GRI talking about pioneering and pushing the frontier of sustainable reporting standards, and having DigiNext kind of making that easier for the average business. And so now I think, as you've mentioned as well, it is a nice segue to our last speaker, Finn. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing all of that. And we'll come back to you as well for the Q&A segment. Now, let's go to our last final speaker for today, which is Miss Finn Han. Finn, you are clearly very experienced as a professional in the audit and consulting angle when it comes to sustainability reporting assurance. Based on what you've done, it was really quite a mouthful. So my first question to you, really just very simple to take us off, since you are the expert in the room in that part of the value chain. How critical is that layer of assurance in producing a credible sustainability report for businesses?
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, and good morning and good afternoon, or maybe good evening, all of you. I've been working for the the SGs for like 10, 11 years on the reporting assurance. And what we were thinking about to answer your Ami's question, I think the SI itself is the evaluation of environmental factors and social responsibility and the governance criteria in companies' ESG policies and their practice, which it also can provide a thorough picture of companies' behavior. Yeah, and through the SI's assessment, which is can ensure that companies' sustainability report, which they meet a certain reporting framework such as like GI, SASB, and then TCFD, and so on. And because recently we've got lots of different reporting frameworks, and even for like you can also against like SDG, UN SDG, and also we using currently the assurance standards such as like AA1000 or the ISA 3000. And then I can talk a little bit about these two different standards in further. So throughout this SLA can increase the credibility of companies' ESG performance information that disclose on their reports. I think probably it answer to your questions. Yeah. So, okay.
Okay, so thanks for that. I think you talked about two different standards, and is essentially how assurance can increase the credibility of a company. And I think that's come through really clearly across all three presentations. So I just wanted to know a little bit more, understand a little bit more about what you mean there. How can companies unlock that full potential of reporting assurance while managing the cost of driving such processes that's been talked about in the previous presentation, as well as also navigating the risk? How does a third party like SGS do that for a company as opposed to a company doing it on its own? Why is it better? Yeah.
No. Okay, so for the assurance standard, we can support the company's ESG sustainability reporting through when we assess and reviewing all these report contents, and we will provide our opinions on how to manage your ESG method and the method of materiality, and then an independent assurance on these ESG metrics and targets. We will verify all these data. So, and also we will check the data management process and system, including the company's internal control evaluation. We reviewed all this, and it's not only we review it, and also we discuss with the company. So we see our client as a partner, with not just kind of like the checking them, like an audit, like a traditional management systems audits, like whether this is meets the requirement or this is a fail. It's not like that. For the reporting assessment, we will try to find the weak points or the pain point of the clients, and then we will provide our outside opinions for them to improve their process. So also we can verify their data and reporting for the non-financial information against all these international standards, and then we will provide our recommendations for this reporting and disclosure. And we have a different scope of options. For example, because in the whole really depends on the client's needs, or they meet the requirement from the governance or the stock exchange regulatory requirements. Some of them might be we will assess to verify their part of their report by selecting some KPI, for example, like greenhouse gas emissions or environment, like water consumption, all these specific KPIs information. Or we can verify the whole report, which is from the very beginning of how you develop or how you prepare for this report by identifying your stakeholders, and then whether your stakeholders expectations, and what are the issue, ESG issue, or materiality process, and then at the end, and the strategy, and the KPI, everything from in the report. So, and also we can, if your report is basically against refer to the certain framework like GRI or SASB or TCFD, so we will check whether you meet the requirements, and how you're gonna disclose all this information, right?
Thanks, Finn. I think in the last 2 slides, you've described so much. So you've talked about so many things that can be done by a third party. I do start to wonder, you know, this might be a really big pain point for small businesses and medium enterprises. You know, this takes a big department to do if you were to have it in-house, I would imagine. And to think about that and put it in context of what Mark shared earlier, I think this is really, this conversation is really starting to sound like a game changer. You know, if GRI, DGNX, and SGS were, you know, to represent that whole value chain. So that was really interesting thought that came up in my mind as you were talking. Thanks so much. I think my last question to you, to really fully like put a nightcap on this conversation, and to bring this home for our audience today, is to, you know, help us understand, you know, how can consumers and regulatory environments, therefore, based on what you've shared, leverage, you know, benefit on sustainability reporting assurance to reach broader business goals? Are there any case studies or any other way you might want to help us understand that?
Okay, there's a case studies I can share with you. Yeah, this is a Delta Electronics. We've been helping them to their providing our SRA for Delta from 2013 until now. Yeah, it's continuing, and we build up a very good relationship with Delta Electronics. And as you might know, Delta is a leading company in power supplies and thermal management solutions, and also the energy savings and the new energy solution. And what we providing them, because Delta is also the listed company in Taiwan, and Taiwan Stock Exchange required all these listing company need to submit their report, and then the reporting framework has to follow the GRI, and also it's for other governance evaluations, companies governance evaluation ratings every annually, which is adding value adding for the company who they publish their report, also has external assurance. So for this case, Delta has purchased our CSR reporting assurance against GI, and then also we providing them to the AA1000 ASV3 type 2 height assurance, and also for their GHG data verification. So for these cases, we're helping Delta from very beginnings, when they are just to build up their reporting, and then from their they have to improve their sustainability development, either their strategy, and also they have built up their targets by using SBTi in the future for their to target their climate change, the GHG emission target to be. I think they've been set the net zeros target by 2050. Yeah. So this is how we go through along with to get along with Delta for these cases.
All right. Thanks, Finn. I think that was fairly comprehensive. I think we have a good picture of how the assurance layer really brings value to a business. And I liked how your presentation completed a value chain of understanding of what SRA really can do, from the standard to the middle point of a company building the report to a third-party assurance process. So now, thanks Finn once again for sharing, and thanks all the speakers once again for joining us. We're now going to go into a Q&A session. I think we have about 10 minutes, about maybe 10 to 15 or so minutes to take a few questions. There have been a few questions streaming in, I think. Very interesting ones coming in. I saw a very interesting one, storytelling as well. But we're actually going to start off with a private question. I received one privately, and this was addressed to Dr. Ali, but I'm sure the other two speakers, feel free to jump in if you want to take the question. The question is, there seems to be a lot of faith in investors. We keep talking about investors, but are they even asking the right questions when it comes to sustainability reporting and assurance? Do you think there is a conflation between enterprise value and sustainability impact from the investor's point of view? Interesting. I think this person picked up on that. Dr. Ali?
Yeah. Thanks, Sammy. That is a very interesting and actually very relevant question, because as you know, investors are, a lot, and investors, it's quite a huge group. So they're saying that it's hard for them to assess the sustainability performance of companies because there's no standardized standardized framework or standards, reporting standards out there. But before that, as you rightfully pointed out, are they even asking the right question? Because the reporting standards by which they should analyze a company sustainability impact depends on how they perceive or how they assess a company's materiality impacts. Right? How do they define materiality? And the thing is, I of course, investors are very important. And I think in this whole sustainability ecosystem, they are actually the most powerful because they have the money and they can really change the behavior of companies. Because if they say to a company, I will not give you money if you don't do this, right? So that is even more powerful than a regulation, right? We all have heard of the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. So anyway, going back, so we have heard a lot of, there was a question I saw about greenwashing. And so while we hear greenwashing on sustainability reports, greenwashing is everywhere, even in investment funds, even in assurance. So we hear a lot of investors saying, oh yes, we are into ESG, we are into sustainability. But if you look, so you will see this, very fancy, grandiose statements. But if you look at their portfolio, they're still into fossil fuel. And I would understand if this is a legacy investment, right? But they are still investing in new projects. So that's why we should also be cautious. Like if an investor comes to us and demands all these things, we should go beyond face value and see if they really mean what they're saying. I've heard of companies going to they encountering investors asking them to do net zero commitments. But again, that's another currency that's being used by companies and investors now. Everyone should have net zero, but the thing is it really applicable to all companies? Because, for example, in the developing world, right, of course, developing countries also do have emissions, GHG emissions, but more than pushing them to make a GHG as net zero commitment, what are their biggest challenge? And that is exposure to extreme weather events. So rather than pushing them to do net zero commitments, why maybe they should also ask, what are your climate mitigation or adaptation impacts? So it's not about, because we're always talking about generalizations, but the most important thing is contextualize. I mean, it's good to have, a set of standards out there, but we should also be discerning and see the context and look beyond what people are just saying and do more research beyond what investors are claiming.
Thanks, Dr. Ali. I think that also does tie in with another question that we got by from Roskamal on whether when a company uses a reporting assurance service, does it still need a third-party verifier? Because I think across that value chain, we are constantly speaking to investors. So we need to think about how that all links up. So I think I would like to actually extend the question I initially asked on investors asking the right questions to Finn and Mark. If you have any comments as well from the work that you do, how does your work help a company communicate to investors on the sustainable impact that the company does, and helping investors rightfully understand that and ask the right questions?
Okay, to respond to this question, I think for the company, recently, I think in the Taiwan's market, which is I'm more familiar with, and there's a trend that the company they want to get the money from the banks. So recently they've got the financial loans, which is linked to the sustainability linked loans. So which is a company needs to make their commitments on their ESG performance, which is they have to set it up some certain KPIs, and then to make sure and all these KPIs also need to be verified by third parties. So we've got some requests from that, and also because all these KPI setting need to link back to the company's sustainability strategies and their operation strategy together, which is not only just because they want money from the banks, they want to lend money from the bank, and then just create some certain KPIs, which is will link to their strategies, such as like environments or their greenhouse gas. But we can see a lot of company, they might link to their, maybe they respond to the CDP's questionnaire, or they disclose on the different disclosure platform all this information. So that's what I observed for this scenario. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Mark, do you have anything to add, or should I go to the next one? You're on mute again. Happens.
Yes. No, I think we've covered this question. I love Robin Hicks's question here, so I think you should read that out loud.
Which one? The storytelling or the other one?
No, scroll down.
Okay, sure. I'm assuming you're gonna take it, Mark. Okay, so
Take it.
Sure. Okay, so I'll read this second question. We'll go there. Okay, a friend working at a media company whose job now involves compiling a sustainability report told me recently, I'm on the ESG committee without any qualifications whatsoever. The monkeys have the key to the zoo. What qualifications do you actually need to complete a sustainability report, and how much of a risk is outsourcing the work to consultants? Actually, I think you are the person to take this first.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So again, I'm going to look at this through the lens of a small and mid-cap enterprise. And often when we approach, or rather they approach us, but looking for a solution, there's a lot of trepidation and security around, we don't know what this is, we don't know how to do it. But the reality is, for much of ESG, these are things which many companies are already doing within their day-to-day operations, particularly on the S and the G side. So the qualifications you need to be able to complete social governance indicators, often your head of HR will be very well placed to be able to answer them. And similarly, the qualifications you need to complete your governance indicators will often be able to be covered if you have a CFO or a legal team will be able to cover those. Of course, environmental does have some more complex issues where you do need expertise to be able to answer them, particularly on the climate. In terms of completing the sustainability report, our experience has been, how do you corral the relevant stakeholders inside a company, so people from the finance department, the legal department, the HR department, together, and use the expertise you already have in-house to be able to complete that. Now, at a large cap size, you almost certainly need a sustainability consultant because there's a lot of coordination that goes on, and there are multiple teams and multiple geographies, and it's very complex. So that is a world where we absolutely need to outsource that to folks who could help you coordinate it. Not absolutely, but you most probably have to. Unless you have a very large in-house team. But at a small cap size, where maybe you're a company of 100 people or 200 people, or maybe you have $20 million, $30 million a year revenue, you can drive that process yourself. You need a quarterback inside the company to drive it, which could be a finance manager or an individual sustainability manager. But most of the qualifications required to complete a sustainability report should already sit inside your company. If you have a head of HR or a legal officer or a finance officer, and again, the environmental stuff can be a bit more complex, but you can bring in outside expertise on individual indicators if as you need.
Thanks, Mark. And actually, I do want to take this opportunity to go to Finn very quickly. I'm going to actually loop in another question from Manwei Chan on assurance methodologies. You know, qualification is a lot of it is on paper, but I think, Finn, you know, with your experience, maybe you can actually share on the assurance methodologies that you use, you know, to show us live for a while, like what your qualifications sound like. Yeah.
Okay, so for our I think maybe I can use my slides or something.
Okay, let's try to get your slides up. Yeah.
Or maybe not. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
I just
you can speak, yeah.
I just quickly speak up the process of our assurance process, which is we divide it to different stages. For the big I think we've got like the five steps, and then the first one, which is when the clients, they just prepare their own, they are starting to prepare their own report, and then which is they have identified what the materialities topics that they are going to disclose. And at that time we will have we will assess a pre-assurance process, which is at that time we will try to figure out the contents and then the boundary of the reporting, and also the materiality, how and also to define to make sure their process of defining the materiality process is reasonable. Yeah, so we kind of review their methodologies and then all these things, and after that we will have a step for the background research for these companies, either from the news press and also from their previous reportings and all these things. And we have a stage 2, which is called stage 2. So the step 3, we go on site to interviews for different parts of because the report has contents like environments, governance, and also something to people related issue, which is maybe we will need to interviews like HR or finance managers, and also the environmental related people, and then and the EHS managers, all these people. So we will through the interviews we will try to understand how they're gathering all these data, disclosure data, whether they follow, if their reporting is follow the GI standards, because for each disclosure items, GI has a very clear what to disclose. So we will check whether they follow the GI's what to follow to disclose. And also we will try to using our assurance standards combined with the AA1000, because they has a full accountability principle, which is including the inclusiveness, materialities, responsiveness, and then the impact, which is kind of a link to GI's the process. So that's what we do for the whole process of that. And after that, we during the assurance, we probably will raise some reporting amendment request, which is like maybe some data was incorrect or something need to be improved. So after that, we have a follow-up, and then and then we will get into our SGS internal process to issue the statement, which is on the statement we will have our recommendation and our opinions on how the company against align with the AA1000's assurance standards, and also how they align with GRI standards. Yeah, that's how we work through. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Very, very comprehensive.
Yeah.
And I think with that, once again, I would like to thank the audience for participating so actively in asking questions to our esteemed speakers, our esteemed presenters for today. And I would also like to once again thank our speakers for today, Dr. Ali, Mark, and Finn, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your expertise and your experience with all of us. Thanks so much. So with that, I think we have about 2 minutes for us to wrap up and end on time. And so I will do that. You know, I think the presentations that we've had today and the conversations that we've had as a result of the meaningful questions you have all asked have really made me think a lot about where the critical lever here really is. You see, in my mind, to create a better world, I think we're all in agreement here that businesses have to be part of that global compact for change. And I think, you know, with Mark bringing up the fact that SMEs really form 90 to 95% of a given economy, I think it's high time we think about that frontier as well. And so I think going from the standards, you know, from for example, for an organization like GRI, going from championing corporate transparency and the principles of sustainability reporting, you know, standards development and propagation, to helping these SMEs take a first step at reporting and then verifying that report. It is a full value chain that represents a better future if done right. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today to have this important conversation on sustainability reporting and assurance. You know, to the average person, it might seem dry, but I think I have confidence that today our speakers have brought light, have lit up this conversation for all of us today. You know, we hope to see you again. EcoBusiness runs regular events. Next week, actually, we have another similar topic on ESG workflow, and we hope to see you there again. Once again, in partnership with SGS, this has been on how to unlock greater sustainability reporting assurance. And, you know, it has been a good time with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and see you once again.